My name is Madeline Rourke, and I'm 38 years old. If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd one day be watching my own funeral from the shadows, I would have laughed. But there I was, hidden behind a cluster of cold stone pillars in St. Agnes Church, wearing a black wig and dark sunglasses, pretending to be a distant acquaintance who had wandered in to pay respects. The air smelled like lilies and deceit. The pews were too full for people who claimed they barely had time for me when I was alive. My sister Phoebe sat in the front row, clutching a tissue she didn't need. She looked stunning in black, she always did, but there was no sadness in her eyes. Just calculation. Every few minutes, she glanced at my lawyer, Mr. Carver, who sat stiffly by the aisle with his briefcase resting on his lap. To Phoebe, this wasn't a funeral. It was a prelude to payday. Behind her sat Grant, my ex-husband. His posture screamed discomfort, his face pale but not from grief. I knew that expression well. It was the face of a man terrified of being cut out of a will he once felt entitled to. He had remarried only months after our divorce, and yet here he was, acting as though he'd lost the love of his life. I almost wanted to laugh. Almost. I scanned the room again. Isla and Miranda, my supposed best friends, sat whispering behind Phoebe. Their heads bent close together, pretending to pray, though their smirks betrayed them. They had always been my circle, my trusted confidantes. But I knew better now. They weren't here because they missed me. They were here because they thought I'd left them something, and maybe I had, just not what they expected. As the priest's voice echoed through the church, I let my eyes drift toward the casket. A polished mahogany box with silver handles, surrounded by bouquets of white roses. They all thought I was in there, burned and broken from a car explosion that had turned my luxury sedan into a coffin of twisted metal. I had planned every detail, the location, the timing, the witness reports. A body was found, though not mine. The remains were beyond recognition. Identified through dental records. I knew that part would work because I had made sure the records matched. It was easy when you had money and a friend in the right clinic. Watching the ceremony unfold, I felt an odd calm wash over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't a target of their greed, their manipulation, their endless demands. I was free, dead, but free. Phoebe dabbed her eyes dramatically as the priest said my name, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. She had always been the family's golden child, the one who got away with everything while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to keep our late father's business alive. When he passed, I inherited the company, not out of favoritism, but because I was the only one who had earned it. Phoebe never forgave me for that. Now, with me gone, she probably felt vindicated. I could almost hear her thoughts. Finally, it's all mine. But she didn't know that the will had already been read. Privately. Quietly. Without a single person in that church knowing the truth. My heart thudded softly beneath the black coat I wore as I shifted in my seat. Every movement felt risky, every breath loud. But no one noticed me. No one ever really had. Even when I was alive, I was invisible unless I was needed. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had to die to finally be unseen on my own terms. The priest's sermon was long and filled with flowery words about a woman of grace, a devoted sister, a loyal friend. If only he knew. If only any of them had seen the way Phoebe siphoned money from my accounts, how Grant seduced my assistant, how Isla and Miranda sold private details of my life to gossip blogs for quick cash. I'd found out everything, piece by piece. And once I had the full picture, I stopped being their victim. That's when the plan began. The first step was hiring Daria, a private investigator with a questionable moral compass but unmatched discretion. She helped me craft my disappearance with surgical precision. The car explosion, the false dental records, the new identity, it was all her work, though I paid dearly for it. Now, as the choir began to sing, I couldn't help but look around one last time. The people I had once called family, friends, partners, all of them gathered under one roof, not to mourn me, but to divide what they thought I'd left behind. Grant's hand twitched nervously as he whispered to Phoebe. She nodded, glancing toward Mr. Carver again. They were both thinking the same thing. When do we get our share? I leaned forward slightly, catching a glimpse of the briefcase at Carver's feet. Inside was nothing they wanted. Only the aftermath of their greed, the real will, the real conditions, the real consequences. When the priest finally announced the end of the service, the crowd began to murmur and stand. Phoebe approached the casket with a fake sob, placing her hand gently on the wood. "Goodbye, Maddie," she said softly, her tone so convincing that even I felt a chill. Then she turned to Mr. Carver and whispered, "When do we begin the reading?" He looked at her evenly, adjusting his glasses. "It's already been done, Miss Rourke." The color drained from her face. Isla and Miranda froze. Grant blinked in confusion. I watched the realization dawn on them one by one. The will had already been read. Their payday was gone before it began. They thought they'd soon be rich beyond measure, but my plan had already changed everything. Watching them all gathered there, I couldn't help but wonder, how did I ever trust any of them? From my hidden spot in the back pew, I studied each face like a ghost revisiting her past mistakes. Every person in that church represented a chapter of betrayal in my life. And now, each of them was about to read the ending they'd written for themselves. Phoebe sat front and center, head held high, trying to appear dignified in her grief. She'd always had that polished, controlled look, the perfect mask of sympathy. To anyone else, she was a heartbroken sister. But I knew the truth behind her calm expression. I could practically see the numbers running through her mind. She wasn't counting memories, she was calculating profit. Phoebe had been jealous of me since we were kids. I was the responsible one, the one who stayed up late helping Dad balance the books while she snuck out to meet boys. When our father died, the family business naturally went to me. She pretended to be supportive, but the resentment never left her eyes. It festered quietly for years until she finally found her opportunity to strike. Then there was Grant. My ex-husband sat beside her, pretending to be somber. But his grief looked rehearsed, almost theatrical. He kept rubbing his wedding band finger as though remembering the weight of the ring he'd thrown away. When I met Grant, I thought I'd found someone who saw me, not my inheritance. He had that charm, the kind that fools not just your heart but your intuition too. But eventually, the mask slipped. I realized that his love had always been conditional, his affection tied to the number of zeros in my account. And when the money started disappearing, he didn't rush to defend me. He stood beside my sister instead. Behind them, Isla and Miranda whispered with matching smirks. I could almost hear them gossiping even at my funeral. We met in college, and they'd been my closest friends for nearly 2 decades. I trusted them with my secrets, my fears, my loneliness. But when times got hard, when my divorce hit the tabloids, they used my pain for clicks and clout. They sold my personal messages to an online gossip forum, spinning my life into cheap entertainment. I forgave them at first, foolishly thinking they'd been desperate. I even lent them money to start over. They never repaid a cent. Now they were sitting there dressed in black designer clothes, whispering like schoolgirls at a slumber party, waiting for their next payday from the grave. I stared at each of them and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just clarity. It was like seeing them through a clean lens for the first time, unfiltered, unromanticized, unworthy. The priest's voice faded into background noise. My focus stayed on Mr. Carver, the lawyer. He was the only person in that room who knew the truth. Every few minutes, he would glance subtly toward the exit, probably uncomfortable being surrounded by such vipers. His calmness was remarkable, considering the storm he was about to unleash on them. When I approached him months earlier with my plan, he didn't flinch. He had seen greed before. He told me, but never like this. He helped me rewrite my will, strip it of every expectation, and replace it with truth. The new will wasn't about inheritance, it was about consequences. Each person in that room had a condition tied to their share conditions that would expose their sins to the world. And the best part? It had already been executed. They just didn't know it yet. The real reading happened quietly, the morning after the supposed accident. Carver had sent out personalized letters to each beneficiary. No ceremony, no cameras, just words and proof. Every transfer, every signature, every betrayal laid bare. They had no idea what awaited them when those envelopes arrived. I almost smiled thinking about it. As the service ended, the guests began to file out. Phoebe lingered by the casket, still pressing Carver for answers. "You mean it's done? The reading?" she asked, voice tight, desperate to sound calm. Carver nodded. "Yes. Each of you will receive your correspondence in the mail within the week." "Correspondence?" she echoed, confusion and irritation flashing in her eyes. "I thought there would be—" "There won't be," he interrupted, per Mrs. Rourke's request. The way he said Mrs. Rourke almost made me shiver. Hearing my name spoken in past tense by the only man who knew I was alive, it was surreal. Phoebe's lips tightened. "Fine," she said curtly, but I knew that tone. She wasn't fine, she was furious. Grant muttered something under his breath and followed her out, Isla and Miranda trailing behind like obedient dogs. I waited until the last person left before slipping out the side door. The sky outside was gray and heavy with drizzle. It suited the mood perfectly. I walked slowly down the side path, careful not to draw attention. My boots crunched on the gravel, echoing faintly against the church walls. Every step felt like a release. For years, I had carried the weight of their lies, their manipulation, their greed. But now, for the first time, I felt light. I stopped near the cemetery gate and turned back for one last look. From the doorway, I could see Phoebe's car parked near the curb. She was arguing with Grant, gesturing wildly. Isla stood beside them, arms crossed, while Miranda scrolled on her phone, probably drafting another post about how heartbroken she was. They didn't notice the funeral director watching them with a frown. They didn't notice me standing in the shadows, invisible to their world. They were too busy plotting how to split a fortune that was no longer theirs. I turned away, pulling my hood up against the rain. My new life was already waiting for me, hidden under another name, another town, another truth. The past was buried. The people who buried me were trapped in the grave they'd dug for themselves. As I walked toward the car Daria had parked for me down the road, I caught my reflection in a puddle. The disguise held perfectly dark hair, glasses, a face softened by anonymity. I wasn't Madeline Rourke anymore. Not to them. Not to the world. And yet, as I drove away, I couldn't help but smile. Because soon, each of them would open their letter and realize what I'd done. Each of them would receive a letter that would destroy their comfortable lies. It all started the day I discovered Phoebe had forged my signature. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning. The kind that begins with coffee, emails, and an endless to-do list. I was in my office, going over supplier invoices when I noticed a transaction I didn't recognize. The amount wasn't massive, just under $8,000, but it didn't sit right. The vendor name was unfamiliar, the signature wasn't mine, and the handwriting had an almost perfect imitation of my own. Almost. I remember calling Phoebe immediately. She was my operations manager at the time, the person I trusted most in the company. She answered on the second ring, all cheerful and casual. "Hey sis, what's up?" I tried to sound calm. "Did you authorize a transfer to Windmere Consultants last week?" Silence. Just a beat too long. Then she said, "Oh, that?" "Yeah, it was just a routine payment. They're handling the logistics for our new shipment." The problem was, there was no new shipment. And I knew then something wasn't right. That evening, I went through 6 months of company statements, cross-checking every transaction. The more I looked, the more I found. $80,000 missing. Quietly withdrawn, disguised under false vendor names. Every check signed with a slightly crooked version of my own signature. I felt physically sick. I sat there in my office long after the lights had gone out, staring at those papers, realizing that my own sister had been stealing from me. The next morning, I confronted her in person. She walked into my office with a smile, holding 2 coffees. I still remember the way her face changed when she saw the papers spread across my desk. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. At first, she denied everything. Then she cried. She said she'd been desperate. That she only took a little, that she'd planned to pay it back. She begged me not to tell anyone that it would ruin her life. Against every instinct, I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to. But it didn't end there. Word got around quickly that I'd accused my own sister of theft, and instead of supporting me, everyone turned against me. Grant was the first. He told me I was overreacting, that Phoebe was just under pressure. He said I was being controlling, paranoid, cruel. Coming from him, the irony was suffocating. Soon, even my employees started whispering behind my back. I could feel the judgment in every hallway I walked through. Phoebe played her role perfectly, teary, fragile, misunderstood. She painted me as the bitter, jealous sister, too possessive to share control. It worked. Within a month, I was completely isolated. My reputation, my family, my business, it all began to crumble. Grant's distance grew into disdain. He stopped coming home for dinner, stopped calling me during the day. When I found hotel receipts in his jacket pocket, he didn't even bother denying them. He told me that maybe he deserved someone more understanding. I should have kicked him out then. But I didn't. I still thought I could fix everything. I was a problem solver by nature, but I didn't realize that some problems are people. By the time our divorce proceedings began, Grant had sided completely with Phoebe. He even helped her with legal paperwork, pretending to be her emotional support. They both stood there in that courtroom, acting like victims while I was painted as a cold, greedy woman clinging to money. That was the day I stopped crying. I remember going home afterward, sitting in the living room surrounded by silence, staring at the remnants of a life I had built with people who never truly loved me. The house felt smaller, somehow haunted by laughter that no longer belonged to me. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about betrayal, the kind that rots your bones and steals your sleep. I didn't eat for days, didn't answer calls. I just sat there, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong, how my kindness had been mistaken for weakness. And then came the final blow. Grant's lawyer sent me a demand letter asking for half of everything, half of the business, half of my father's estate, half of the assets I'd worked my entire life to protect. I stared at that letter for a long time before I started laughing. A deep, broken kind of laughter that comes only when pain runs out of places to hide. That was the night I decided something inside me had to die. It wasn't an instant plan. It began as a thought, quiet, trembling, but persistent. If they wanted the money, the status, the attention, fine. Let them have it. But not the real thing. Let them chase a ghost while I walked away free. For weeks, I studied everything about identity disappearance, how people vanish without trace, how insurance fraud works, how records can be falsified. The more I read, the more possible it became. When I finally found Daria's name on an online forum, a private investigator who specialized in difficult disappearances, I felt something click. I sent her an encrypted message that night, and within 2 hours, she replied, "Tell me everything." That single line changed the course of my life. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My eyes were hollow, my cheeks pale, my lips cracked from sleepless nights. I realized then that Madeline Rourke, the woman everyone had betrayed, humiliated, and broken, was already gone. All that remained was someone waiting to bury her properly. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. That realization was the day I decided to let Madeline Rourke die. Disappearing wasn't easy, but desperation sharpens creativity. The first thing Daria told me was, if you want to vanish, you have to die convincingly. Otherwise, people will come looking. Her tone was calm, matter of fact, like she'd done this 100 times before. Maybe she had. She wasn't the kind of woman who wasted words or emotions. Her face was sharp, her eyes cold, and yet there was something oddly reassuring about her. She didn't judge me, she just calculated the possibilities. We met in a motel outside of town. I remember sitting on that stiff bedspread, hands trembling as I slid an envelope across to her. Inside was everything: my reason, my pain, my confession. Daria read it silently, then looked up. "You've been hurt badly," she said. "But I need to know something before we start. Are you doing this to escape? Or to get even?" "Both," I answered. "But mostly, to end it." She nodded slowly, as if that was all she needed to hear. From that moment on, my rebirth began. The first step was practical. Finances. I had to move money without raising suspicion. Over the next month, I sold off assets under the guise of downsizing. A vacation home, 2 vehicles, and my art collection were liquidated quietly, funneled through legitimate channels until the proceeds landed in a trust Daria helped me set up under an alias. No one blinked. People assumed I was rebuilding after the divorce. The second step was more complicated: my death. Daria handled the logistics with chilling precision. She found a crash site, a stretch of highway near a cliff notorious for accidents. The plan was simple but brutal. A staged car fire, a body burned beyond recognition, dental records confirming it was me. The body part was the hardest to stomach. Daria assured me it would be handled. I never asked how. Some questions are better left unanswered. All I knew was that when the explosion happened, the authorities found remains that matched mine perfectly. The night before it all went down, I sat alone in my house for the last time. Every corner whispered memories, holidays, laughter, arguments, sleepless nights. I walked through each room, touching the walls as if saying goodbye to a version of myself that no longer existed. When I reached the bedroom, I looked at the framed photo on my dresser, Grant and me, smiling in some fake moment of happiness. I smashed it without hesitation. At dawn, I drove to the meeting point, a secluded road near the cliffs. Daria was already there, dressed in black, her hair tied up, face unreadable. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for a long time," I said. She handed me a new phone, a small duffel bag, and a passport. The name printed on it: Margot Hale. My new self. My second life. I parked my old car near the edge and stepped out, taking one last look at the ocean beyond. The waves crashed violently below, their rhythm oddly comforting. It felt poetic. Madeline Rourke would vanish where the world ended. Daria started the timer on the device she'd placed inside the car. "We've got 90 seconds, she said, her voice steady. I backed away, heart pounding in my chest. With every step, I felt lighter, freer. When the explosion came, it was deafening. Fire engulfed the car, the shockwave pushing against my chest like the world exhaling one final time for me. I stood there, hidden behind rocks, watching the flames consume my old life. And just like that, Madeline Rourke was gone. We didn't speak on the drive back. Daria dropped me off 3 towns over at a small gas station, where a new vehicle waited, cheap, unremarkable, with fake plates. I climbed in, hands still shaking, and drove for hours. My body trembled. But not from fear, from release. That night, I arrived at a remote cabin deep in the woods, far from everything familiar. It was small but warm, stocked with the essentials. Daria had thought of everything: new IDs, a prepaid debit card, even groceries. For days, I barely moved. I slept in bursts, waking to the sound of my own heartbeat, half expecting police sirens or knock at the door. None came. The world believed I was dead. When the news broke about the accident, it was everywhere. Local headlines, social media, even national outlets covered it briefly. Businesswoman dies in tragic car explosion. I read the comments online. Some were sympathetic, others were cruel. But one line from Phoebe stuck with me. She was reckless. I tried to warn her. Reckless, that word burned more than the fire ever could. But while they were busy mourning, something else had already happened. My lawyer, Mr. Carver, had executed my final instructions. The true will, the one I'd rewritten 6 months before the accident, was already in motion. No courtroom, no drama, no audience, just justice. Quiet and irrevocable. I remember sitting by the cabin window that night, watching snow begin to fall. The world outside looked peaceful, untouched by the chaos I'd left behind. I poured myself a glass of cheap wine and whispered my new name aloud for the first time. Margot Hale. It felt strange, foreign. Like trying on a coat that didn't quite fit yet. But it would. In time. Daria called once to confirm that the plan had gone smoothly. "They'll never find you," she said. "But remember, don't contact anyone. Not friends, not family, not your lawyer. Dead means gone." "I understand," I replied. When she hung up, I sat in silence, staring at the dying embers of the fireplace. A part of me wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I felt something else rising, a strange, electric calm. I wasn't dead. I was reborn. And as I looked out into the snowy night, one thought kept echoing through my mind, steady and unshakable. The best part? My real will had already been read, privately. Most people think a will is about money, but mine was about truth. I didn't want my death to enrich anyone who had destroyed my life. I wanted it to expose them. So instead of leaving behind gifts or assets, I left behind revelations. The will I signed 6 months before my accident wasn't a financial document, it was a mirror. And when each of them looked into it, they would see who they truly were. It started with a single sentence I told Mr. Carver when I first walked into his office. I don't want to leave them money. I want to leave them themselves. He stared at me for a long time, then leaned back in his chair and said, "You're not the first to wish for revenge, Mrs. Rourke. But you might be the first to design it like a masterpiece." From that day, we worked in secret. We drafted, rewrote, and perfected the document until it read like poetry, cold, factual poetry. Each name came with a clause, each clause with a consequence. Phoebe's clause was the most direct. She had always assumed that, as my only sibling, she'd inherit everything by default. But my will made it clear she'd receive nothing unless she returned every dollar she stole from me. Not only that, but she would have to make a public apology, acknowledging her theft in a notarized statement. If she refused, every remaining asset in my name would bypass her and instead go to a women's shelter foundation I created in our mother's name. Grant's clause was harsher. He would inherit my real estate shares and investment portfolio, but only if he confessed, in a public recording, to every act of infidelity and manipulation he committed during our marriage. The confession would be published in local newspapers and submitted to the divorce court that once favored him. Otherwise, the assets would revert to charity as well. Then came Isla and Miranda. Their clause required both women to submit a written admission of their betrayal, specifically the sale of my private messages and photos to tabloids. They were to record a joint video apology, publish it online, and make a donation to the foundation using the same amount they had been paid for those stories. Anything less would void their claims. Mr. Carver was meticulous in ensuring everything was legally airtight. "They'll hate me," he warned. "They'll hate the truth," I said. He nodded slowly. "And the truth is what you're really leaving behind." Each letter had attachments, bank statements, audio recordings, documents, and emails. Evidence, proof. Every lie they told had a receipt, and every receipt was waiting to be opened. It took months to compile. Daria helped me collect everything before my death: hidden USB drives, cloud backups, old texts, even CCTV footage from my office. Together, we built a dossier of deceit so complete it was almost clinical. When the time came, I signed the final draft. It felt strange, knowing I was signing away not my fortune but my identity. "Mr. Carver looked at me one last time and asked, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I remember smiling. I already did. After the accident, Carver followed my instructions precisely. The will was read in private, no witnesses, no court session, no family gathering. Each recipient received their own personalized envelope. Inside, a letter that detailed their inheritance and the conditions required to claim it. I can only imagine their faces when those letters arrived. Phoebe's, twisting with fury as she realized the trust she'd stolen from would now expose her crimes. Grant's, paling as he read the word confession. Isla's, trembling with the weight of public humiliation. Miranda's, breaking under guilt she'd tried so long to ignore. That image gave me more satisfaction than any amount of money ever could. For once, they couldn't twist the story. There was no argument, no courtroom manipulation, no gaslighting, just written truth. I spent that evening sitting by the fire in my cabin, rereading the copy Mr. Carver had mailed to my new address under my alias. I went through every line again, running my fingers over the embossed paper, the inked signatures, the notary's seal. It was perfect, cold, final. The longer I stared at it, the more I realized that my will wasn't just a punishment, it was closure. The Madeline who had spent years seeking approval, trying to fix broken people, had finally stopped explaining herself. Her voice existed now only through the words of that document. There was a deep comfort in that thought. My silence would say everything my voice never could. A few days later, Daria visited me at the cabin. She stood in the doorway, her coat still damp from rain, and said, "It's done." "What is?" I asked, though I already knew. "The letters were delivered. All of them." I nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. My pulse steadied. "Then it started." She smiled faintly. "Oh, it started all right. You should have seen the lawyer's face when they came storming into his office demanding answers. You really did a number on them." I poured her a glass of wine. "They thought they could bury me with their greed. Instead, I buried them with their own truth." She raised her glass, a smirk curving her lips. "To poetic justice, we drank to that." That night, I slept soundly for the first time in years. No nightmares, no echoes of old arguments, no guilt. Just peace. But deep down, I knew the storm hadn't truly hit yet. The real chaos would begin when they realized this wasn't just about inheritance, it was about exposure. Because money can be replaced. But reputation? That's what they valued most. And I had just stolen it from them the way they once stole my dignity. And when they opened those letters, the chaos began. Phoebe's reaction was everything I expected, dramatic and venomous. Daria told me she recorded it on her phone, hidden in her jacket pocket. When I watched the footage later that week, I couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. My sister was in full performance mode, standing in the middle of Mr. Carver's law office, her voice rising like a storm about to break. "You expect me to believe this?" she yelled, waving the letter in the air like it was a personal insult from the afterlife. "This is a joke, right? A sick, twisted joke?" Mr. Carver sat behind his desk, perfectly calm. His expression was that of a man who'd seen too many greedy faces to be moved by one more. "It's not a joke, Miss Rourke," he said evenly. "It's your sister's final will and testament. I'm simply executing her wishes." "Wishes?" Phoebe spat, pacing back and forth. "You mean her spite? She was insane, always paranoid, always accusing me of things I didn't do." Carver adjusted his glasses. "You did forge her signature, Miss Rourke." "Multiple times. We have bank statements, digital records." "Those could have been faked," she snapped, cutting him off. Her voice cracked, betraying the panic behind her rage. "You don't know what she was capable of. She's not the saint you think she was." The irony almost made me choke on my coffee as I watched. Daria's camera caught everything: the trembling of Phoebe's hands, the way her face reddened as she tore the letter to pieces. She threw the scraps across Carver's desk like confetti at a party no one wanted to attend. "I won't do it," she shouted. "I'm not confessing to something I didn't do. You can keep your money." Carver didn't flinch. "That's precisely what will happen, Miss Rourke. Every asset you might have claimed will now go to the foundation your sister established." Phoebe froze mid-motion. "What foundation?" "The Rourke Women's Shelter Initiative," Carver replied, tapping the folder in front of him. "It was created in your mother's name. Your sister specified that if any beneficiary refused her terms, their share would be redirected to the shelter." I could see the moment Phoebe's rage turned to disbelief. "She can't do that," she whispered. "She can't just take what's mine." Carver met her gaze without blinking. "It was never yours to begin with." Those words hit her harder than any slap could. She stood there, trembling, jaw tight, eyes darting like a cornered animal. For the first time, I saw something beyond anger in her expression: fear. Not of losing the money, but of losing control. Phoebe had built her whole identity around being the smarter one, the manipulator, the one who always came out on top. But now, the floor had disappeared beneath her. She stormed out of the office, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. Daria followed discreetly, filming from across the street as Phoebe emerged into the daylight like a woman possessed. She shouted into her phone, no doubt calling Grant or Isla, maybe both. I paused the video right there and let out a long breath. For years, she'd gaslighted me, made me question my sanity, twisted every accusation into an attack against herself. Now she was the one losing her grip. Justice doesn't always arrive in courtrooms. Sometimes it comes in envelopes. The following day, I heard through Daria that Phoebe had tried to contest the will. She showed up at the courthouse demanding a hearing, claiming mental instability, fraud, coercion, anything to discredit me. But the evidence I'd left behind was bulletproof. Her forged documents, her bank transfers, her digital signatures, they all spoke louder than her tears ever could. Mr. Carver handled her with surgical precision. He presented every piece of proof methodically, unemotionally. When the judge dismissed her petition, she reportedly broke down in the hallway, screaming that I'd ruined her life even from the grave. In a way, she wasn't wrong. Daria later told me that Phoebe stopped showing up at work. The employees at the company whispered that she'd been drinking heavily, locking herself in her office for hours. The theft investigation that I'd quietly initiated before my disappearance was still active, and now, with my will exposing everything, the authorities had enough to reopen the case. Phoebe's reputation began to crumble. She tried to reach out to Grant, but he was too busy dealing with his own letter. Isla and Miranda avoided her like she carried a curse. One night, I sat by my cabin window and imagined her alone in her empty house, surrounded by luxuries that no longer belonged to her. I wondered if she finally understood how it felt to be betrayed by the one person you trusted most. I didn't hate her anymore. Hate would have meant I still cared. I felt something colder, cleaner detachment. Daria arrived the next day with updates. "She's unraveling fast," she said, dropping a folder on my table. "Screaming matches with lawyers, fights with the press, police inquiries, she's cornered." I looked at the photos Daria had taken. Phoebe outside the courthouse, makeup smeared, eyes wild. She looked like a ghost wearing my face. "Let her burn it all down," I said quietly. Daria smirked. "You really don't want to stop, do you?" "I already have," I replied. "The rest is just gravity pulling everything into place." That night, as I replayed the footage again, I realized something strange. Watching Phoebe's rage didn't fill me with joy or triumph, it filled me with silence, a deep, echoing quiet inside me. Maybe that's what freedom actually feels like, the absence of noise from people who once ruled your life. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glow of the fireplace. Phoebe's empire of deceit was crumbling piece by piece, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I knew she wasn't finished. She'd never been the kind to accept defeat gracefully. She'd lost everything she stole, but she still had her pride. And pride, when cornered, can be dangerous. I knew this was only the beginning of their unraveling. Grant's letter was the cruelest one of all. If Phoebe's downfall was loud and chaotic, his was quiet, like a fuse burning down toward an inevitable explosion. Daria told me she'd personally delivered his letter to his office, and when I later saw the footage from the security cameras, I almost didn't recognize him. His once perfectly tailored suits now hung looser on his frame. The confidence he used to wear like armor was gone, replaced by a twitchy paranoia that made him look 10 years older. When he opened that envelope, I knew exactly what he would find inside 5 pages of truth, written in my calm, deliberate tone. It began simply, "To Grant Morrison, my husband in name only. You spent years taking from me, lying to me, and painting yourself as a victim. You told the world I was cruel, controlling, and cold. This letter is your mirror. Look at it closely." Then came the conditions. He would inherit a portfolio of properties and investments, but only if he fulfilled one demand: a full, public confession. He had to record a video admitting to every affair, every manipulation, every financial lie. He had to publish it within 30 days, unedited, unfiltered, and signed digitally as proof of authenticity. If he refused, all of his potential inheritance would be seized and transferred to the Rourke Foundation for Women, the same charity Phoebe had forfeited her claim to. When I wrote those lines, I pictured his face turning pale, and Daria's footage proved I was right. The moment he reached that paragraph, Grant's hand froze. He read it again and again, his lips moving silently. Then he slammed his fist against the desk so hard the coffee mug shattered. "She's dead," he shouted. "She can't do this. She's gone." The secretary outside his office jumped at the noise. He tore the pages into shreds, then stopped halfway through, realizing that destruction wouldn't change the facts written on them. The letter was legally binding, notarized, and accompanied by evidence. Pages of evidence. Every affair was listed: names, dates, locations, even photos from a private investigator I'd hired long before I died. Every financial deception was backed by bank statements, hidden transfers, and email threads between him and his lawyer plotting to bankrupt me during the divorce. It was all there, neatly bound in truth he couldn't escape. He tried, of course. For days, he fought it. According to Daria, he called Mr. Carver's office at least a dozen times, demanding to speak with him. "This can't be legal," he barked. "She's manipulating me from the grave." Carver calmly reminded him that the will had been verified, witnessed, and sealed months before my death. Every clause was legitimate, every condition enforceable. Grant's next step was denial. He told everyone he knew that the letter was fake, a hoax meant to ruin him. But then, someone, probably Daria, leaked one of the attached photos to a gossip blog. It showed him kissing one of his assistants, time-stamped while we were still married. The damage was instant. His business partners began to pull out of deals, clients canceled contracts. The media swarmed his office, demanding comments about his late wife's explosive will. Within a week, he was drowning in rumors and scandal. Then, on the 10th day, something unexpected happened. He recorded the video. It wasn't slick or rehearsed like the speeches he used to give at corporate events. It was raw. His eyes were red, his voice shaky, his hands trembling as he looked into the camera. "My name is Grant Morrison," he said, "and everything you've heard about me is true." He confessed to everything, every affair, every manipulation, every lie. He admitted that he'd married me for money, that he'd used Phoebe to gain access to my business, that he'd even discussed having me declared mentally unstable to seize control of my assets. The video spread faster than either of us could have imagined. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded. The man who once prided himself on being untouchable was suddenly a public disgrace. His company's stock plummeted overnight. I watched that video alone in my cabin. He looked hollow, broken. There were moments when he paused, staring off camera like he was trying to find a reason not to keep going. But he always came back to the lens, as if some invisible force compelled him to finish. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. I couldn't help but whisper, "Goodbye, Grant." A part of me thought I'd feel triumphant watching his downfall, but I didn't. Instead, I felt something sadder, heavier, a kind of mourning for the illusion I'd once believed in. We had shared a life, even if it was built on lies. Seeing him undone like that was proof that both of us had lost more than we ever gained. When the confession ended, he looked straight into the camera and said, "Madeline, if you can hear this, I'm sorry." The words hit me like a cold wind. I knew he didn't mean them, not fully. Grant's apologies had always been transactional, offered when the cost of silence was too high. But still, hearing my name in his mouth again made me feel something I couldn't name. Daria called that night. "You saw it?" she asked. "Yes," I said quietly. "Then you know it's done. He's finished." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "He's free too," I murmured. "He just doesn't realize it yet." Because that's what truth does, it destroys before it heals. After the video, Grant's world collapsed completely. His partners abandoned him, his second wife filed for divorce, and the IRS came knocking with questions about offshore accounts I'd conveniently exposed. Within 2 months, he was bankrupt. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. A man like Grant doesn't disappear quietly. Beneath his shame, something darker was festering. A wounded ego, a broken pride, a hunger for revenge. I could feel it even from miles away, watching his downfall unfold from my cabin window. He'd confessed his sins to the world. But deep down, I knew it wasn't redemption he wanted anymore, it was retribution. But justice has a way of making even pity feel undeserved. My old friends thought they'd been clever. For years, Isla and Miranda had perfected the art of pretending to be loyal, to be kind. To be the kind of women who celebrated your success rather than resented it. I had met them in college. Two bright, ambitious girls who seemed to understand me in ways others didn't. We laughed, dreamed, and built futures side by side. But years later, as my business grew and my marriage deteriorated, I learned what they truly were: opportunists wearing friendship like perfume. They had both received their letters the same day. I pictured them opening the envelopes in their respective homes, expecting to see zeros on a check, and instead finding their sins neatly documented in black and white. Daria told me their reactions couldn't have been more different. Miranda called Mr. Carver's office in tears within the hour. Isla, on the other hand, went straight to social media. Her post read, "Some people can't handle the idea that not everyone worships them. Even in death. She's obsessed with control. R.I.P. Maddie, but maybe stay gone this time." Thousands of likes. Dozens of supportive comments. It was exactly the kind of performance I expected from Isla. She'd always craved attention more than truth. But attention is fragile. And the truth is patient. Because my letter to them hadn't been just accusations, it was evidence. Every private message they sold, every lie they whispered, every transaction they made with the tabloids, it was all there. Screenshots, dates, and the payment trail from the gossip site's editor to Miranda's bank account. The proof was irrefutable. 2 days after Isla's post, an anonymous email was sent to a journalist she often collaborated with. Attached were all those files. I didn't send it myself, Daria did, following my final instructions. Within hours, the headlines hit. Influencers exposed. Betrayal behind the scenes of a dead friend's scandal. Their names were everywhere. Miranda crumbled first. She deactivated all her accounts, issued a public apology through shaky tears on a live stream, and admitted everything. She said she'd been manipulated by Isla, that she'd only done it for quick money, that she'd been drowning in debt. Watching the video from my cabin, I almost believed her. Almost. She said. Madeline trusted me. And I betrayed that trust. I'll never forgive myself. It wasn't redemption, but it was real. Isla, however, chose a different path. She doubled down. She called it a smear campaign, claimed the documents were fabricated, and accused the estate of trying to ruin her. She called me mentally unstable, even in death, saying I had always been jealous of her growing fame. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. The internet turned against her fast. People started digging into her past old lies, staged stories, manipulative sponsorship deals. Every piece of her online image began to unravel. Within a week, brands pulled out of contracts, and her followers dropped by the thousands. Daria sent me a video compilation one evening. It showed clips of Isla's public meltdown, her angry live streams, her crying apologies, her endless attempts to spin the narrative back in her favor. Watching it felt surreal. I remembered all the nights she sat in my kitchen, gossiping about others, promising she'd never betray me because real friends don't do that. And now here she was, exposed to millions as exactly what she'd become. I thought I'd feel glee, but instead, I felt something colder: vindication. A clean, quiet kind. Miranda eventually reached out to the foundation through an attorney, offering to volunteer. Daria intercepted the message, forwarding it to me with a note. She's trying to make amends. I stared at that line for a long time. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe she really wanted to do something good after being stripped of everything fake. Either way, I allowed it. I told Daria to let her volunteer under supervision, anonymously. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. As for Isla, there was no redemption. She disappeared from the internet after one final outburst, a rant that ended with her throwing her phone at a mirror mid-live stream. The sound of shattering glass was the last echo of her career. And just like that, my friends were gone. Their downfall didn't bring me joy the way I'd once imagined. It was like watching dominoes fall in slow motion, inevitable, predictable, strangely anticlimactic. I realized revenge doesn't taste like victory, it tastes like silence. That night, I sat outside my cabin, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the forest hum around me. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace creeping in, not the euphoric kind, but the kind that comes when you finally stop waiting for people to understand how deeply they hurt you. They had destroyed me once, and I had destroyed the illusion of who they thought I was. We were even now. I could have stopped there. I could have closed that chapter, moved on, and started fresh as Margot Hale. But Daria's tone on the phone the next morning told me something new. "There's movement," she said. "What kind of movement?" "Someone's looking for you," she replied. My heart dropped. "Phoebe?" Daria hesitated. "No. Not her." I stood by the window, staring out into the misty morning woods. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger's. "Then who?" She sighed. "Grant." A chill ran through me so sharply I had to sit down. He had lost everything, his money, his name, his pride. I should have expected this. A man like Grant doesn't vanish into shame. He hunts it down until he can rewrite it. I tried to tell myself I wasn't scared, that he wouldn't find me, that Daria had covered every track. But in my gut, I knew better. When the powerful lose their power, they become desperate. And desperation was the one thing Grant Morrison had always excelled at. But Daria warned me someone had begun looking for me. The moment Daria told me, my blood ran cold. I had spent months believing I was untouchable. I'd mastered silence, perfected invisibility. But the instant I heard Grant's name, every illusion of safety crumbled. I could almost feel his shadow creeping through the cracks of my new life, searching, sniffing, waiting. Daria met me in person that night, arriving at the cabin just after sunset. She looked uneasy, something I'd never seen from her before. Usually she was composed, confident, a professional ghost maker. But this time, her expression was tense. She didn't even take her coat off. "He's hired someone," she said. I froze. "What do you mean, someone?" "A private investigator," she replied. "An ex-cop named Dennis Lyle. He's good. Too good." "How close?" She hesitated. "Close enough to start asking questions about the crash site. Close enough to wonder why the dental records were so conveniently damaged." I sank into my chair, feeling the air leave my lungs. "He doesn't believe I'm dead." Daria nodded. "Not anymore." The room fell silent except for the soft crackle of the fireplace. My mind was racing images of Grant's angry face, his cold voice, the way he used to corner me in arguments, twisting every word I said. He'd always been skilled at control. And now, stripped of everything, he had nothing left to lose. I tried to sound calm. "Maybe he'll stop once he realizes how futile it is." Daria shook her head. "No. This isn't curiosity, Maddie. This is obsession. He's not looking for closure. He's looking for revenge." The way she said my name, Maddie, not Margot, made something inside me tighten. I'd worked so hard to bury that identity, but hearing it again reminded me who I used to be. The woman he had broken. The woman who had died. "What do we do?" I asked quietly. "For now," Daria said. "We move you. New place, new documents, different state. It'll buy time." I looked around the small cabin. It wasn't much, but it had become a home. My sanctuary. The idea of abandoning it made my stomach twist. "How long until he finds this place?" "Maybe days," she said. "Maybe weeks." But he's persistent. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak of the wood floor, every whisper of wind against the window felt like footsteps. I kept imagining headlights cutting through the trees, a silhouette standing at my door. The peace I'd earned was dissolving, replaced by the same gnawing anxiety I thought I'd buried along with my old name. The next morning, Daria left to handle a few loose ends, whatever that meant. She was good at keeping her methods vague. I didn't ask questions. I just knew she'd do what needed to be done. For 3 days, nothing happened. I went about my quiet routine, reading, walking the forest path, pretending normalcy could still exist. But on the 4th day, I saw it. A car parked on the gravel road. Half hidden by trees. Unfamiliar. No one ever came this far out. I told myself it could be nothing, a lost hiker, a delivery mistake. But when I looked again through the blinds an hour later, the car was still there, empty, engine cold. My pulse quickened. That night, I heard it. The crunch of footsteps outside the cabin. Slow, deliberate. I turned off the lamp, pressing my back against the wall, heart pounding so loud I was sure whoever was out there could hear it. A soft knock followed. 3 times. Then, silence. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Minutes passed. Then the sound of retreating, footsteps, fading into the dark. When morning came, I found a small folded note tucked beneath my front door. No words, just a photo. My photo. From the funeral. Me, in the back row, wearing my wig and sunglasses. The caption scrawled on the back read, "I see you." My hands trembled as I dropped it onto the table. Daria returned that evening, and when I showed her the note, she cursed under her breath. "He's closer than I thought," she said. "He must have gotten a lead through someone." "Someone?" I asked, my stomach knotting. She didn't look at me when she said it. "Maybe Carver, or one of his assistants. Information leaks happen." But the doubt was already there, whispering in the back of my mind. Or maybe it was her. Could I really trust Daria? I'd paid her more than anyone else in my life, but money has limits. Loyalty doesn't come with a receipt. That night, I packed a small bag, just the essentials. If I had to run, I would. I'd done it once, I could do it again. But before I could make that decision, Daria came back into the room. "Listen," she said firmly. "Don't panic. He doesn't have proof yet. He just suspects. As long as you don't make contact with anyone, we can still stay ahead of him." Her voice was calm. Too calm. I wanted to believe her, but something about her tone felt off, like she was holding back. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked. She sighed. "He's not working alone anymore. He's paying people off. Journalists, maybe even local cops. He's desperate to find you before the story fades." I stared at her. "What happens if he does?" Daria looked me straight in the eye. "Then we make sure he wishes he hadn't." That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. My reflection stared back at me, Margot Hale, the woman who was supposed to have escaped. But in the dim light, I saw something else. The ghost of Madeline Rourke, the woman who had died for peace, but found herself hunted again. I thought I had buried my past, but my past was clawing its way back. Grant's confession hadn't freed him. It had turned him into something worse, a man with nothing left to lose and one final obsession. The forest outside whispered in the wind, dark and endless. Somewhere out there, I knew he was getting closer. I didn't realize how close he already was. It was raining when I heard the knock on my door. The kind of rain that comes down in sheets, drumming against the roof like a warning. I was sitting by the fireplace, half asleep, the last embers glowing orange when that sound jolted me upright. 3 sharp knocks. Slow. Measured. The same pattern I'd heard weeks earlier, the one that had haunted my dreams ever since. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't told anyone where I was. Not Daria. Not Carver. No one. I froze for a moment, then crept toward the window, parting the curtain just enough to see through. Headlights flickered in the distance, the faint outline of a car parked at the end of the gravel road. My pulse quickened. I knew that silhouette. That shape. That car. Grant. The air felt electric, charged with the kind of dread that makes your skin crawl. I stepped back from the window, clutching my phone. My instinct screamed to call Daria, but a colder thought followed fast behind. What if she already knew he was coming? The knocking came again, louder this time. "I know you're in there, Maddie." His voice called through the door, low and calm, almost conversational. "You don't have to hide anymore." Hearing my name in his voice again was like being dragged backward through time. I felt every bruise his words had ever left. Every manipulation disguised as affection. I backed away slowly, heart pounding so loud it filled the silence between the thunderclaps. He shouldn't have been able to find me. I'd been careful, meticulous. But he had always been good at finding my weaknesses. "Maddie," he said again, softer now. "Please, Just talk to me. The rain outside grew heavier, blurring the windows in a silver wash. I took a deep breath and forced my voice steady. Go away, Grant. A pause. Then a laugh. Low. Bitter. So it's true, he said. You really are alive. The weight of those words hit me harder than I expected. The last piece of my illusion, my supposed death, shattered with that one sentence. He didn't sound angry. Not yet. But I knew him too well. Calm was always the prelude to something worse. I moved to the back of the cabin, where my escape bag was hidden behind a loose floorboard. I grabbed it, slinging it over my shoulder, then glanced around for a weapon, anything. My hand closed around the fireplace poker. Cold. Heavy. Solid. The front door creaked. My stomach dropped. He'd forced it open. Don't, I whispered to myself. Don't panic. Grant stepped inside, his figure silhouetted by the dim porch light. He looked soaked, rain dripping from his hair onto the wooden floor. His eyes locked on mine, immediately sharp, unblinking, familiar in all the worst ways. You're alive, he said again, quieter this time. Almost in awe. I raised the poker slightly, my hands trembling. Stay back. He didn't move closer, but he didn't back away either. I'm not here to hurt you, he said. I just needed to see you. To understand. Understand what? I spat. How it feels to lose control for once. He exhaled, his shoulders sagging. I deserved what you did, he said. All of it. The will, the confessions, the humiliation. But I need you to know I didn't want to destroy you. I wanted you to forgive me. Forgive you? The words tasted like rust on my tongue. You tried to ruin me. You lied. You used me. You took everything and called it love. His face twisted with pain. Or maybe regret. I lost everything when you died, he whispered. Everything that mattered. I shook my head, tightening my grip on the poker. You didn't lose me, Grant. You threw me away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The fire crackled weakly, the rain hammered against the roof, and the smell of wet wood filled the air. Then he took a slow step forward. I didn't come to fight, Maddie. I came to end this. End it how? He reached into his jacket pocket. I froze. But when he pulled his hand out, it wasn't a weapon, it was the letter I'd left behind for him. Crumpled, water-stained. I've read this 1,000 times, he said. Every word burned into me, I confessed. I lost everything. And still, I can't sleep. I see you everywhere. I hear your voice. That's guilt, I said coldly. You should try living with it. He smiled, faintly sad, broken. I have, every day. But seeing you now, his voice cracked. Maybe this is what I needed. Closure. Something inside me softened for a split second. For all his cruelty, he looked small now. Defeated. Like a man who'd been running from his own reflection for too long. I lowered the poker slightly. Then you have it, I said quietly. You've seen me. I'm alive. Now go. He stared at me, eyes glistening. Where will you go? Somewhere you'll never find me again. He nodded slowly. Good, he said. Maybe then we can both stop pretending to be ghosts. He turned toward the door, pausing at the threshold. I never meant to hurt you as much as I did, he murmured. You did anyway, I replied. He gave me one last look, a hollow, defeated kind of look, and stepped out into the rain. I stood there for a long time, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading into the night, the car door closing, the engine starting. Only when the headlights disappeared down the road did I finally breathe again. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, the poker clattering beside me. I should have felt relief, closure. But what I felt instead was dread. Because if Grant had found me, someone else could too. I stared at the open door, the rain pooling on the floorboards. Something about the night felt unfinished, unsettled. And then, through the sheet of rain outside, I saw a dark car parked just beyond the trees. The engine still running. My heart stopped. Phoebe's car. But as I watched him drive away, I didn't notice Phoebe's car parked across the street. Phoebe always had a sixth sense for secrets, and now she had proof. I should have known she wouldn't let it go. Even after losing the company, her money, and her reputation, Phoebe's need for control burned hotter than ever. I didn't realize just how far she'd go until Daria called me 2 days after Grant's visit, her voice low and strained. "We have a problem," she said. My stomach tightened. "What kind of problem?" "Your sister," Daria replied. "She's been following Grant for weeks, and now she knows where he went that night." I gripped the edge of the table, my pulse spiking. "She saw him come here?" "She saw him leave," Daria corrected. "She's got photos, Maddie. She knows you're alive." The words hit me like ice water. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I'd expected Grant might lose control, maybe even try to find me, but Phoebe? I'd underestimated her all along. "What's she going to do with it?" I asked finally. Daria exhaled on the other end of the line. "She went to Carver's office this morning. Stormed in, waving the pictures around like a trophy." I closed my eyes, picturing the scene, the same office where she'd once shredded my letter, her fury now replaced by smug triumph. "She told him she had evidence of fraud," Daria continued. "Said he helped you fake your death to cheat her out of her inheritance." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. "And what did Carver say?" "He denied everything, of course, but she wouldn't stop. She said she'd go to the police, the press, whoever would listen." The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in around me. For months, my world had been built on silence and secrecy. Now both were slipping through my fingers. "Do you think she'll actually do it?" I whispered. "With Phoebe?" Daria said dryly. "She'd set herself on fire if it meant taking you down with her." She wasn't wrong. My sister had always been ruled by emotion, envy, rage, pride. But this time, her desperation would cost her everything. Because Carver wasn't just my lawyer, he was also my insurance policy. He called me that evening, his voice steady but edged with tension. "Your sister made quite a scene," he said. "Threatened lawsuits, arrests, even a media conference. And you handled it?" "I did," he said. "I reminded her that any attempt to expose you would violate the final clause in your will." I frowned. "The final clause? The one you insisted on adding at the very end," he reminded me. "It states that any party who publicly challenges your death or the execution of your estate forfeits their claim and triggers a full investigation into prior misconduct." My breath caught. I remembered that clause now. At the time, it had seemed like a small, almost petty precaution, but now it was my last line of defense. "What happened after you told her?" I asked. Carver's voice darkened. "She didn't believe me until I showed her the paperwork. Then she went quiet. Too quiet. She left without another word." The silence after that call was heavy. I sat by the window, staring out into the rain-soaked forest, my reflection pale and uncertain in the glass. If Phoebe had seen me, if she had proof, then the illusion was over. The question wasn't if she'd use it, it was how soon. 2 days later, I had my answer. Daria arrived at the cabin unannounced. Her face pale. "You need to see this," she said, holding out her phone. On the screen was a news article from a local paper. The headline read, "Businesswoman's death under review, new evidence surfaces." Below it was a blurry photo of Grant's car parked on the gravel road outside my cabin. And in the distance, barely visible through the rain, was the faint outline of a woman at the window. Me. I felt the blood drain from my face. "She leaked it." Daria nodded grimly. "She sold the story. Claimed it was a conspiracy between you and Carver to fake your death. What happens now?" "She just committed suicide," Daria said flatly. I looked up sharply. "What?" "Legally speaking," she clarified, "her accusation violates the will. Carver's already filed the paperwork. The foundation will seize what's left of her assets. And the evidence of her embezzlement has been sent to the authorities." The realization settled slowly. Phoebe had played her final card and lost. That night, the police raided her townhouse. The next morning, news broke that she'd been taken into custody for fraud, perjury, and tax evasion. The photos she'd leaked were dismissed as fabrications, her credibility destroyed by her own greed. I watched it unfold from my cabin, the news anchor's voice echoing softly through the room. Phoebe Rourke, the disgraced sister of the late businesswoman Madeline Rourke, has been arrested following allegations of financial misconduct. Sources claim the investigation stems from newly uncovered evidence related to her late sister's estate. There it was, my closure, delivered through the calm cadence of a stranger's voice. I thought I'd feel victorious. I didn't. I just felt tired. Phoebe had been many things: a liar, a thief, a narcissist. But she was still my sister. Somewhere in the mess of it all, there had been love once. Twisted, fragile, poisoned by jealousy, but love nonetheless. Watching her being led away in handcuffs, it didn't make me feel safer. It just made me feel lonelier. Daria stayed with me that night, sitting across from me at the small wooden table, sipping coffee in silence. After a long while, she said, "You did what you had to do. Don't second-guess it now." I nodded, staring into my mug. "It's over then." She hesitated, then looked up. "For her maybe, but not for us." Her tone made something inside me tighten. "What do you mean, us?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the window, her reflection flickering in the glass. "You should start thinking about what comes next," she said softly. "People don't just walk away from stories like yours." I frowned. "Daria, what are you not telling me?" "You hired me to make you disappear, Maddie. But you never asked what I'd do once you were gone." And just like that, every ounce of calm I'd built began to unravel again. Because suddenly, it wasn't Phoebe or Grant I was afraid of. It was Daria. But one name still haunted me. Daria. Trusting Daria had been my biggest mistake. It sounds ironic now, doesn't it? I built an entire plan around deception, around outsmarting people who had betrayed me, and yet, in the end, I was betrayed by the one person I paid to protect me. I suppose it was inevitable. Money buys skill, not loyalty. After Phoebe's arrest, things went quiet for a while. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels like waiting. Daria was still around, checking in more often than before, sometimes dropping by the cabin unannounced. She always said it was to make sure no one else got close, but her questions had changed. She wanted details, numbers, account information, where I'd moved the last of my funds. At first, I didn't think much of it. She had helped me build this new life, new identity, new documents, everything. I thought she was just maintaining her system, but then I noticed small inconsistencies. Her phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. The half-smile she gave when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she stopped using my alias and started calling me Maddie again, like she wanted to remind me who really held the power. One evening, I asked her directly, "Is there something you're not telling me?" She met my gaze across the table, her expression unreadable. "I should be asking you that," she said. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Phoebe's arrest drew attention," Daria said. "Investigators are digging into every corner of your estate. Sooner or later, they'll find something that doesn't add up. And when they do, they'll start looking for you." Her tone was calm, but her eyes cold. Analytical betrayed something else. "Calculation." I leaned back slowly. "And I'm guessing you have an idea how to make sure that doesn't happen." She smiled faintly. "Of course I do. But solutions aren't free." There it was, the turn. I should have known it was coming. Daria never did anything out of kindness. Every favor had a price tag attached. But hearing her say it so bluntly still stung. "How much?" I asked quietly. "Half," she said without hesitation. "Of everything that's left in your hidden account." I stared at her, stunned. "You already got paid, Daria." "That was for your death," she said smoothly. "This is for your life." The silence between us felt like ice. I studied her face, sharp, confident, utterly unshaken. She'd already decided. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an announcement. When I didn't respond, She leaned forward, voice lowering. Look, Maddie. You and I both know what happens when people get greedy. I've seen it 100 times, so let's not make this messy. Transfer the money, and I disappear for good. You'll never see me again. My heart pounded in my chest. She sounded so casual, so practiced, like she'd done this before, maybe to other clients. Maybe to everyone. I kept my tone steady. You're bluffing. Her smile widened just enough to tell me she wasn't. Am I? That night, after she left, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the storm roll in across the dark horizon. My mind spinning through possibilities. I had built this world so carefully, piece by piece. I couldn't let it all crumble now, not because of her. The next morning, I packed a small suitcase, enough for a few days. I withdrew the remaining cash from my local account, just enough to survive, and destroyed my backup phone. If Daria was watching my movements, I wasn't going to make it easy. But she was always one step ahead. When I walked back into the cabin that evening, the door was already open. My stomach dropped. Inside, everything looked the same, too much the same. Nothing was missing, but I could tell someone had been there. The air felt disturbed, like a room after a storm. Then I saw it. An envelope on the table. My name written in Daria's neat, looping handwriting. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You should have trusted me, Maddie. You're not the only one who knows how to disappear. Consider this my severance package. By the time you read this, your accounts will be empty. Attached was a photo of my bank statement. 0 balance. Every cent gone. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the paper, unable to process it. My safety net, my future, my carefully constructed freedom, it was all gone in a single calculated move. When the first tear slid down my cheek, it wasn't sadness, it was fury. Not the raw, wild kind that consumes you, but something sharper. Focused, cold. I'd been played again. Outwitted, outmaneuvered, but not defeated. I grabbed my coat, my fake passport, and the remaining cash I'd hidden in the wall safe behind the bookshelf, a small amount Daria didn't know about. Enough to get me out of the country if I moved fast. I walked out into the night, the rain soaking through my clothes, and didn't look back. Every step I took away from that cabin felt like closing a door. By dawn, I crossed the state border under the name Mara Dean. That was the final death of Madeline Rourke. No more letters, no more foundations, no more revenge. Just a woman stripped of everything, walking into anonymity once again. As the morning light broke through the clouds, I stopped at a diner off the highway. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, older, harder, but finally real. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I was still standing. I pulled out Daria's letter, lit it with my match, and watched it burn to ash in the parking lot. Madeline Rourke would never exist again. It took months before I felt truly free. When you vanish twice, the world starts to feel like a ghost story you've written yourself into and can't quite escape. Every face on the street becomes suspicious. Every sound at night feels loaded with memory. But after enough time passes, fear starts to fade, not because you stop looking over your shoulder, but because you finally realize there's nothing left behind you worth turning back for. I ended up in a small coastal town on the northern edge of Maine, the kind of place that doesn't ask questions. People there minded their own business. They respected silence. I rented a room above a bookstore owned by a widowed woman named Greta, who loved cats and crossword puzzles. She hired me to help run the shop 3 days a week. The pay wasn't much, but it was enough. Under the name Mara Dean, I became someone new, a quiet woman with a soft voice and no past. The first few weeks felt strange, like wearing someone else's skin. Every time Greta introduced me to customers, I expected them to frown, to say my real name, to expose me, but no one did. No one even looked twice. To them, I was just another passerby, a woman who preferred solitude and long walks by the water. The bookstore smelled of old paper and sea salt. The creaking floorboards and steady hum of rain against the window became my new heartbeat. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. No nightmares, no replaying arguments or plotting vengeance. Just dreams of waves and quiet mornings. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of the world I left behind, a headline online, a passing mention on the news. Phoebe was serving a 6-year prison sentence for financial crimes. Grant had disappeared from public life completely. Some said he moved abroad, others said he drank himself into oblivion. Isla's social media empire was gone, replaced with a series of vague, self-healing posts that fooled no one. Miranda, surprisingly, had stayed true to her word. She was volunteering at the foundation regularly, helping women rebuild their lives after abuse. That part made me pause the first time I saw it. Out of everyone, I hadn't expected her to change. Maybe guilt can grow something good if it's planted deep enough. As for Daria, nothing. No trace. It was like she'd dissolved into the same mist she came from. I checked, once or twice, just to be sure. Every account she'd ever used was gone. Every lead dead. Maybe she really had moved on. Or maybe she was still out there, watching, waiting for me to slip up. But over time, even that fear dulled. I built routines. I'd open the shop with Greta at 8 a.m., sweep the front steps, sort through the new shipments of books. I found comfort in simple things: the smell of coffee brewing, the sound of gulls over the harbor, the rhythm of life without manipulation or greed. No one called me Maddie anymore. No one expected anything from me except kindness. And that was enough. One evening, Greta invited me over for dinner. She told me stories about her late husband, her grown children, the decades she'd spent in that little town. "People come and go here," she said, pouring me a glass of wine. "But you seem like you've been running a long time." For a second, I froze. My instinct was to lie, to laugh, to deflect. But then I realized she hadn't asked a question. She'd simply stated a truth she'd quietly observed. I smiled faintly. "Maybe I have," I admitted. She nodded, her eyes kind. "Well, you don't have to run here. Everyone comes to the ocean for the same reason: to forget." That night, as I walked home along the boardwalk, the sea breeze tangled my hair, and I let myself breathe deeply. The scent of salt and pine filled my lungs. I realized she was right. The ocean doesn't judge. It takes everything: grief, secrets, anger, and turns it into something calm, something endless. In that moment, I let go. For the first time since the accident, I didn't think about my old life, my will, or the people I'd left behind. I thought about tomorrow, opening the shop, feeding Greta's cats, maybe baking bread like she'd taught me. Some nights, I'd sit on the sand with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the horizon fade to black. The waves rolled in, steady and soft, like the heartbeat of something greater than guilt or revenge. I found myself talking to the ocean sometimes, whispering apologies to the woman I used to be. "Thank you," I'd say softly, "for surviving long enough to let me live." I'd built my revenge on their destruction. But what I'd gained afterward was far quieter, a lesson that peace doesn't come from punishing others. It comes from finally choosing yourself. And just when I thought the past had truly been buried, the universe reminded me that ghosts never stay buried for long. It happened one morning in early spring. The bookstore had just opened, the sun spilling golden light across the counter. Greta handed me the mail, humming as she wiped down the shelves. "Looks like something came for you," she said casually, placing a plain white envelope on the desk. I frowned. Hardly anyone knew this address. My hands hesitated before I picked it up. No return label. No stamp. Just my name, Mara Dean, typed neatly across the front. My pulse quickened as I turned it over and slid a finger beneath the seal. Inside was a single folded letter, cream paper, familiar font. My heart stopped when I saw the header. Rourke Estate, Executor's Office. For a moment, the room tilted. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the page. The words were simple, typed cleanly across the top. To Madeline Rourke. "If this finds you, it means the conditions of your will have been fulfilled. We need your signature to finalize the foundation's transfer. Please contact us, Mr. Carver." I stared at it, the noise of the shop fading into silence. He knew. Somehow, after all this time, he still knew. Greta called from the back of the shop, breaking my trance. I quickly folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket before she could see. For hours, I couldn't stop thinking about it the way my name looked in print, sharp and alive again. It was like a ghost tapping on the door of my new life, whispering that the story wasn't quite finished. That night, as I sat on the beach under the moonlight, I took the letter from my pocket and read it again. My hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from something else. Recognition. Maybe this was closure. Maybe it was an invitation. Until one day, a familiar letter arrived at my door. Addressed to Madeline Rourke. My hands trembled as I opened it. Even after everything I'd endured, the betrayals, the lies, the deaths both real and staged, nothing prepared me for the sight of that letter sitting in my palm under the dim glow of the moon. The paper was heavy, expensive, embossed with the Rourke family seal. I hadn't seen that symbol in years, not since the day I faked my own death. Seeing it again felt like staring straight into the eyes of the ghost I'd tried to outrun. The sound of the waves filled the silence around me. I could hear the wind whispering through the dunes, soft and cold against my skin. I hesitated, my thumb tracing the edges of the envelope, half afraid that opening it would somehow undo everything I'd built. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. It doesn't care how much peace you've earned. I tore it open. Inside was a single page typed neatly, signed in a familiar hand. My breath hitched when I saw the signature. Arthur Carver. My old lawyer. The one man who'd known every secret of my plan. The man who'd carried my story like a silent witness. The letter began simply, "If you are reading this, it means the final clause of your will has been executed." I blinked, unsure what that meant at first. Then I kept reading. "Every asset, every trust, every charitable contribution has been finalized. The foundation you built in your mother's name has grown beyond any expectation. It now operates in 3 states, shelters hundreds of women, and is entirely self-sufficient. You once said you wanted your death to mean something. It did. It changed lives." I swallowed hard, the words blurring through a sudden rush of tears I didn't expect. I hadn't cried in years. "There is one remaining matter," the letter continued. "The Rourke estate is now closed. But the world still believes you are gone. You have a choice, Madeline. You may remain dead, or you may reclaim your name. If you wish to return, sign the attached form. If not, no further communication will be made. The decision is yours alone." My hands trembled harder now. I looked down and saw the second page, a legal form, pristine and blank except for one space where my signature should go. Next to it lay a check, made out to the Rourke Foundation for Women, in an amount so large I couldn't even process the numbers. For a long time, I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at my old life folded neatly into 2 pieces of paper. If I signed that form, I could come back. I could reclaim my name, my fortune, my history. The world would know I'd survived. I could live again as Madeline Rourke. But if I didn't sign, if I stayed gone, then that name would vanish forever, sealed away in the archives of time. The decision should have been easy. I'd fought so hard to escape that identity, to bury it with all its pain. But now, holding the proof that my death had built something good, a legacy, a living monument of redemption, I felt something stir inside me. Wasn't that what I'd wanted all along? To matter? I folded the papers carefully and stood, walking closer to the shoreline. The tide was rising, the moonlight shimmering over the black water. Each wave pulled away a piece of the beach, carrying it somewhere unknown. I thought of my father and his stern voice reminding me that truth always costs something. I thought of Phoebe, brilliant and broken, trapped by her greed. I thought of Grant, who confessed his sins too late. Isla and Miranda, who destroyed and then tried to rebuild. And Daria, the shadow who'd taught me that even in secrecy, betrayal finds a way in. They had all been pieces of me once. Each one reflected a part of who I was, my trust, my naivety, my vengeance, my strength. Losing them had been like burning pieces of my own soul. But now, standing on that empty beach under the weight of my final decision, I realized something that all of them had missed. Revenge doesn't end with victory, it ends with forgiveness. Not of them, of myself. I knelt in the sand, the letter trembling in my hands. The ink glowed faintly under the moonlight. The check fluttered in the breeze like a pale ghost, threatening to fly away. I took a deep breath, my voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Mr. Carver," I murmured to the sea, "for keeping your promise, for giving me one last choice." Then I pulled a match from my pocket, the same kind I'd used to burn Daria's letter months ago. I struck it against the rock beside me, the tiny flame flaring to life in the darkness. For a moment, I just watched it flicker, small, fragile, alive. Then I touched it to the corner of the paper. The fire caught instantly, the edges curling inward as the heat consumed every word. I held it until the flames kissed my fingers, then let it go. The wind carried the ashes upward, scattering them across the waves until they disappeared into the night. My name, Madeline Rourke, was gone for good. I stood there for a long time, the sand cold beneath my feet, the air tasting of salt and smoke. And then, for the first time, I smiled. Not the smile of victory, not even relief. It was the soft, steady smile of peace. Because in the end, I had what none of them ever would: freedom. The world believed I had died, and in many ways, I had. But the woman who stood on that shore was not a ghost anymore. She was someone new, someone whole. The ocean roared louder, the waves swallowing the last traces of ash. I whispered my final goodbye into the wind. "Good night, Maddie." And with that, I turned away from the past forever, walking barefoot across the sand toward the dim lights of the small town that had become my home. Each step felt lighter, steadier, more certain. I didn't need to reclaim my name. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. My story had already been written, and it had ended exactly the way it was meant to. I wasn't Madeline Rourke anymore. I wasn't the victim, or the avenger, or the ghost. I was just Mara Dean, a woman who'd finally learned how to live without being haunted. The tide washed up over my footprints, erasing the trail behind me as though I'd never been there at all. Because Madeline Rourke may have died once, but this time, it was forever by choice.